Good morning, everyone. We have a presenter. Okay. We have a presenter that's in India where it's very late over there. So I think we've delayed enough waiting for people to show up from breakfast. No hard feelings if you're still eating right now. Thank you for coming to case studies of transitioning datasets from specialist to generalist repositories. The organizers for this session are just three interested people in this. We have examples, three examples, and it's also a paired session with archiving your first or second data set, which will follow right after this. So here you get to listen to us rant and rave for an hour and 30 minutes, and you get to rant and rave back at us. And then afterwards, we'll all put down our pitchforks and you'll watch us go through a tutorial, a demonstration of how to put your data into a generalist repository as best as we can right now. Certainly things could definitely be better from the specialist repository perspective, but this is about as good as we can do with one repository, and there will be lots of time to try to put your own data sets into there. That's what we will do afterwards. So what are we discussing today? There is a very spirited discussion in the COPDES session about the virtues of specialist repositories versus generalist repositories. And as probably the person in here that has put the most data sets in a generalist repository, but still having specialist repository expertise, I feel obligated to present a defense of generalist repositories. And you can all tell me why I'm wrong in the Q&A session afterwards. Then we will go into three different case studies that are not in order. We have the NSF NCAR GDEX migration to Zenodo. We have the CCHDO GoShip EasyOcean dataset migration to Zenodo, and then we have CDAC to the Harvard Dataverse, I believe. And then after we go through these three case studies, all of us will probably talk for very varying amounts of time on the case studies. So I can't tell you how much time we have for this discussion, but there should probably be at least half an hour to poke holes in why we did these things and why we should leave them on specialist repositories. And my response to that is, if you have money, please give it to us so we can keep our specialist repositories running. Anyway, so generalist repositories. Why generalist repositories? This is a diagram from the NIH for GRAY, their Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative. There's long history about it that we don't have time to get into, but needless to say, the NIH is probably the leading funder of generalist repositories in the US. Their development, alignment of their work. This is year 4 or 5 or something. It's almost done. So after that, probably they will no longer be the leading funder of generalist repositories. We'll see. But okay, so generalist repositories. We have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generalist repositories that are in the GRAY program at the bottom. I think you can think of it as these are the ones that you should generally tend to, or people will generally talk about or think about when mentioning generalist repositories. There are probably others out there, but they do not get nearly as much discussion. And of these, at least in the physical sciences, geosciences, where we are, Zenodo is probably the elephant in the room. And these repositories came out of different disciplines, different backgrounds, which is kind of why there are so many of them. You think there could be one ring to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them. But instead, you have one that sort of rules in, say, the life sciences space, which was Figshare, is Figshare, and then they got bought out by one of the publishers, and NIH gave them a lot of money, and everybody revolted for all their researchers, and so they were forced to put on gray to continue to, so that people just would be happy with them. But you can see that some are paid, some are or for-profit, nonprofit. Generally, these repositories are for smaller, easier data sets in complexity and volume. These generalist repositories focus on the adoption and not the creation of widely accepted standards. There are pushes from the publishers, as we heard yesterday, to go to these generalist repositories rather than going to specialist repositories that make your data more fair. There's already the Zenodo, the GitHub to Zenodo extension that will deposit your software there in basically one click. There are integrations built into other publishing platforms for data. They're not very good. There's a for-profit company started by people in neuroscience that are pushing a product called Fair Squared that uses AI and a lot of software to handle a lot of the complexity that we might handle now as curators. They are partnered with Frontiers. Frontiers is paying for the compute for the AI agents. They are still looking for examples right now. So if you'd like to see how it's done and you'd like to publish for free in Frontiers, go and talk to them, and they may allow you to publish in their journals for free. And they will use your data and your publication as a use case. And also for these generalist repositories, anyone can submit. And there is a lot of spam. Talking to people at Zenodo, they do filter out a lot of junk submissions. So that's something that's could be different from where we might sit in specialist repository land. And I just wanted to throw up a quote from the Gray web page that NIH, although they support these 7 repositories, they do not necessarily endorse one over the other. They're all supposed to be equal. So generalist repositories. Yeah. They have some features that can be very helpful. They're starting to add more community organization features to facilitate third-party curation. You can have your researchers push something to someplace and then have them tag you as a curator, and then you can go in and clean it up for them after the fact. It's not great, but it is possible, at least on Zenodo. I don't quite know about the other ones out there. For Zenodo, it is open source. The software that underlies it is called Invenio. They have developers all around the world. Their main US partner is Northwestern University. So if you wanted your developers to start working on Invenio and add features that we all want, you could do so. You could look at their issue tracker on GitHub, choose something, or better yet, add 100 issues and add no information afterwards, and then they'll close them all for you because you do nothing with it. Co-opetition. This is something that NIH stated they want the generalist repositories to all get better at the same time, but they all compete at the same time against each other to push each other to get better. And generally, for a lot of these repositories, if you want to do something more than the base use case, you can talk to them. They have people that are the heads, contact points for institutional repositories, larger data sets. Their titles vary, but you can talk to them and you can even pay them some money and they will start assigning a developer to work on features that you want. And at least in the case of Zenodo, because those features are implemented into the open source Invenio RDM, you can turn around and then redeploy it at your institution somewhere else. And it is deployed at many universities around the world, governments. You can look at their page. They have lots and lots of icons that go on. So specialist repositories. I tried to do a little bit of thinking about what sets apart the specialist repositories from generalist repositories right now. We have the best curation of datasets, generally, certainly much better because at least the people that are generally handling the software systems know how to do some curation as opposed to a researcher that's just trying to get a citation for their journal as fast as possible and just fill in the required metadata fields. We have tighter specialized integrations with other resources. If you're putting everything out in Geneva, Switzerland on CERN's infrastructure, and then you need to bring it back over to Boulder or Austin or Oak Ridge to do compute on it, you're going to spend a lot of time on transfer and bandwidth. Our repositories are already co-located with compute. You don't have to spend so much time moving tens, hundreds, lots of petabytes of data back and forth for this compute. We are known. We have things like Core Trust Seal for trustworthiness. We hopefully won't just disappear one night. We'll see. We are the first choice repositories right now for specialized needs beyond citation readiness. But looking at the future, what happens in this place where essentially data management is becoming commoditized and it's something that anybody can do? The specialist repositories can still be the leading edge of data management, still be the ones developing the standards, figuring out how to deal with metadata complexity, with volumes that are far beyond what any generalist repository would accept. And on-prem hosting, compute proximity, maybe that'll change at some point in the future. Maybe these repositories will go to the cloud or Amazon or Google or whoever start to get into the data management business just so they have data to feed their AI models. Let's not think about that right now. That's a scary thought. But as far as developing extensions to schema.org or Croissant or any of that, that's something that we're still very well positioned to do. And I think that's something that we can focus on. If you have the money, we will archive, curate, distribute it. A big selling point for a lot of these generalist repositories is that it's free to you up to a certain point. And so if you are trying to do something that is not free, cannot be free, you should come and talk to us. Shelley had the figure about how 2,000 plus data citations were through Zenodo yesterday. 2,000 citations at a max of 50 gigabytes is only 100 terabytes of data. Satellite data sets, model output data sets can all overwhelm that with just one data set. That is something that generalist repositories will never want to do because that's not their business model. And as repositories of last resort, right? If generalist repositories won't take it, but your research is funded, and you need to fulfill open science, open data requirements, then the specialist repositories will be your last resort. That will be the only place you can put it. And so this should say the number of deposits might go from 90% in specialized repositories and 10% in generalist repositories to the other side. Right now, we have the advantage in numbers just because we've been running for decades, and generalist repositories have not been around as long, but I would expect that to flip, if not already flipped already. And with the features that generalist repositories are adding for communities, organization management, essentially trying to get into the space where we have this platform for data management, and you can pay us and you can use our infrastructure in the cloud to manage your data. They're adding that sort of commercial features that would allow for specialist repositories to be hosted in cloud-based other placed generalist repositories. So a possible future of generalist data management or generalist repository data management for depositors. They want to deposit it in the easiest to find and the easiest to use repository. Maybe there's some magical place out there that is even easier than the one-click repositories that exist. But if no one can find it, is anyone really going to use it? They'll use things like do-it-yourself schema generation, where you slap together a whole bunch of standards together. This website, protocols.io, was built for this in the life sciences. And so it can give them sort of a CSV template metadata file that will put all of it together. Unfortunately, they didn't have a good monetization model, so they got bought out by one of the publishers while they were struggling. But it's still very useful, apparently, to those in the life sciences. I can see something where someone starts slapping together CF with some ecological data, and you have this metadata on metadata that tells you these fields are from CF conventions, these are from ecology, these are from biology, so on and so forth. For depositors, they submit it to a generalist repository. There's an automated check curation workflow upon submission. So then it'll tell them exactly what's wrong and maybe make recommendations on how to improve it. And they never have to talk to a human they don't want to talk to, which may be all of us. They have science to do. They're too busy to deal with data management. And so for curators, for us, what does the future look like for us in a generalist repository data management? We might be roving Wikipedia editors that are going around fixing metadata, fixing records landing pages for people that submit. Either they submit to trusted communities like the NSF/NCAR community we have today, or they are really roving Wikipedia editors that say, hey, this record is bad in so many ways, and I'm willing to spend the time to improve the metadata there. And one of the platforms allows it. I don't think that's a great idea, but I mean, people didn't believe Wikipedia would work, and it's come so far, so maybe that's a possibility. Developing curation workflows to be implemented by code and AI agents, standards. I mean, we all have our checklists and flowcharts of what do we do when we get a data set. There's no reason these things can't be implemented in code. We can do other things with AI agents. Let's not go too far down that rabbit hole right now. And then making data sets AI ready, because everything is about AI readiness these days, by fixing the IR affair on problems that might be caused by humans or robots that are doing a bad or just incomplete job of interoperability and reusability with FAIR. Now that I've completed my rant, I will take questions after the case studies. We will go directly into Alex's presentation of CDAC to Harvard Dataverse.
Yeah, Alex, you could go ahead and share.
And unmute yourself.
And that.
I'm unable to share. I know.
Can you make Alex a co-host? Okay,
Is it-
1 second. Okay, you should be able to now.
Thank you. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I'll try to get this up here. Hopefully you're
We need the
seeing
AP.
this. See it? Okay, I'm gonna shut off video because it's probably too low bandwidth from where I am in India. Can you hear me now? We'll just acknowledge that they're hearing me.
We're looking for the AV people to help. Oh,
Is there an AV problem?
You're very soft.
Hello, testing.
Yeah, we're working on raising the volume in the room.
Okay.
Could you please test your mic for the room?
Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Okay. Oh.
Great.
Yeah,
Can
I
you hear
think,
me?
yeah,
Okay.
we're ready now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to the organizers, thanks to Ruth Durer who reached out to me about this opportunity. Apologies that I can't be there in person. Just a rapid fire sort of like chronology of where, why we're migrating our data to the Harvard Dataverse. The spoiler has already been alerted in the sense that you know that we're doing that. So we were issued a stop work order as part of the larger stop work order issued to Columbia University Contracts and Grants from the new administration on 7th of March. Then we discovered just by, checking the list periodically that we were on the DOGE list on the 27th of March. Later in March, we discovered, or early April, we discovered that CDAC data had been removed from the Earth Data catalog. We began to get complaints from users about the inability to access the data. People were saying, including some of the people who entrusted their data to us, these are the data owners or the data producers, saying that, they checked their DOIs from their journal articles or things like that, and they were no longer active. So we moved very quickly to find an alternative repository for our data. And we were anticipating, but we finally received a termination notice at the end of April. I'll just say up front that whatever I say during this presentation, I don't want it to be construed in any way as a criticism of the NASA ESDA staff, who were nothing but supportive for all the years that we ran CDAC. We all know that there have been new political winds blowing, and very few people can fully avoid those winds. And I know that many of those staff have also suffered from some of those political winds as well. Many of you are aware of the number of people who have retired or left NASA as a result of the recent changes. So our archive size is pretty limited, pretty small by comparison with most NASA archives. So this gave us the flexibility to find an open repository, generalist repository, with only about 6+ terabytes. It comes, I don't know, it depends on what day you ask, but I hear between 6 and 10 terabytes basically that we have, and then another 17 non-disseminable archive information packages and about 100 terabytes in non-disseminable data, which is basically the input data. We have about 300 data sets with about 61,000 granules. So a lot of those data sets have multiple inputs. The user base is, so each year we have about 700,000 files downloaded, a user base of about 208,000 registered users via Earth Data login. and about 17,000 users per month. And all of our data are licensed under the CC BY. You can currently go to this web link to find access to our data. It's on our season website, not our CDAC, since those servers have been essentially, they're in the process of being shut down, but for now they're just being blocked. And partly that's just to prevent malware and other things, cyber hacking and things of that sort. So the map collection as well was a point of issue. It's an issue that we're not able to address yet, but we have a very large map collection associated with our data. And we'll see if we can actually zip up all those maps and put them in the Harvard Dataverse. So what I was observing back in April was really in March and April, there were a lot of efforts that were rather ad hoc but well-meaning to take data that were being disappeared from government websites and putting them on, Google Doc lists online and with links to, other Google Drives or Dropboxes or other locations where people had rescued the data, which was all incredibly important, and the users are to be commended for doing that. But from the start, we wanted the CDAC data collection to be in one place, and we wanted to be fair. So that led to a discussion internally and to my efforts to reach out and a few of our staff to few different repositories. But I'm going to say one more thing before I talk about our conversations. It's just that we also have data that are, we're very nearly ready to release or which are still requiring a little bit of further development, but which could be released in the next 6 months or so. And the fact that we had all these data sets that were ready to be released, we can't do that through NASA now. Our contract was terminated. We're unable to do that. But we wanted a home for these data sets that we would continue to grow, a place that we could continue to grow our data collection, not as a CDAC data collection, but as a CIESIN collection. So we had these conversations. We started with Academic Commons, which is the Columbia Library's data repo. We quickly learned that there were size limitations to to Academic Commons that would prohibit dissemination of some of our larger data sets, which meant that we would not be able to retain the data in a single collection. We would have to have it dispersed. And so I kind of ruled that option out. We then talked about the possibility of setting up some Columbia-funded servers, but we worried about long-term sustainability of doing that. And so we opted against that. The cost would be substantial, even though they might be less than the security requirements and the other things that were associated with us running a NASA repository. CERN was very kind. Well, basically, this is Zenodo, I should say. I should have said /Zenodo. But Steve Diggs, who's in the room, and Ruth Doer, who I assume is in the room, were very helpful in having a conversation about the possibility of moving our data in, using Zenodo. But we were losing all of our programmers. So, staff were being shed. I didn't go into the details of who we've lost as a result of these cuts, but pretty much all of our data curation staff, all of our data management staff, the data systems team, the metadata specialists, the systems admins, well, everything you need to run a repository, we were losing in rapid succession as either staff found new jobs, which we were very happy about when they could find jobs, or retired. And in very rare instances, we've had to lay some people off. So we really didn't have the means to support a Zenodo-based bulk ingest. That was really the challenge. Yes, we could set up individual data sets one at a time and probably use tools that were open and available. But to do a bulk ingest, we needed help. I'm going to skip Harvard for a moment because I'm going to get to them in a moment, but they were definitely in our conversation. Queen's University in Canada, we had a contact there. We thought, great, let's get these data offshore. CERN was one reason we were looking at, Get them to Switzerland, get them to Canada, get them anywhere that they could be preserved long-term. Queens was very helpful and we had some good conversations. They run, I think, a node of Harvard Dataverse. And they also are part of Borealis, which is a version of Harvard Dataverse in Canada. And so there were some options there, but they didn't really have staff to support us with the bulk ingest. ICPSR, also extremely helpful, a very good option for us because we are a socioeconomic data repository, but the cost would have been prohibitive for us to maintain our data in ICPSR long-term, and we would have had to figure out a way, because they have a subscription model, to pay those subscription dues. And, you know, we were running out of money. You know, we still have some money, but, you know, we're running out of funds, essentially. Esri, considered them proprietary. Some of our data are already in the Living Atlas. Frankly, you know, I didn't like the idea personally of having our data in a commercial enterprise kind of catalog. You know, we work closely with Esri, no bones, you know, no particular beef with Esri, but I didn't want to go that route. And we never really did talk with Figshare or some of the others that were listed in the slide that preceded me. So we could talk about why we didn't go for some of those other options, but I think we had a pretty long list that we explored. And these were each conversations that, you know, might last a few weeks. Ruth and Steve were on emails with us for at least 3 or 4 weeks as we were trying to sort out what to do. So it was there was some overhead in having these conversations with these different groups, and we had to minimize that overhead to some degree as I was dealing with staffing issues, budget issues, a whole range of things. So ultimately we opted for HDV because all I had to do was send one message to the general, like, contact us email form. Normally I distrust forms, email forms. I never get responses. Most of us have that experience. Well, they responded within like 12 hours and said, we're very interested and we'd love to have a conversation. So, yep, that was really good. Secondly, BU and Harvard have a jointly funded project called CAFE, the Climate and Health Research Coordinating Center Collection. And this collection really fit in many ways, covered a lot of the spectrum of topics of interest to our user community. So we needed to look at it also from the user community perspective. What would they like to see? Would they like to see our CDAC data in one comprehensive collection? And would they like to see it in a place where they might normally look? And I think that ticked another box for us. We didn't need any custom coding to work with them. They are doing a lot of work on their end to match our metadata standards, which are the, the National Federal Geospatial Data, FGDC standard, to their standards. But, you know, it wasn't a very difficult crosswalk. And we could use some of our staff. Data staff have been very dedicated, even when they knew they were going to lose their jobs. And even after losing their jobs, they've still been dedicated to helping us try to get this data into Harvard Dataverse. So that shows the kind of commitment that people have had to doing this. HDV has an endowment. So immediately when we heard that Harvard was going to lose all of its federal funding, I was kind of concerned, but we had already had a conversation with them about the fact that they had a separate endowment and a model for sustainability, a funding model for sustainability. Furthermore, any costs that Season would incur would be pretty reasonable. So they laid it all out and told us what the cost would be for the longer term storage using a few different options that they had. Their data are also backed up offshore through Borealis's Canadian node, and they could accommodate data from another Season project, Grid 3, which is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that project wants to put their data in this larger collection. They already have their own, they all have their own data and metadata catalog, but they saw real value in having all Season data in one common repository. And then finally, they have an API at Harvard that they would allow us to use, that we could use to create a data catalog on Season's data page. So we would actually be able to allow people to search directly from Season and not have to go through the Harvard Dataverse to find our data. I mean, all of these were just overwhelmingly points in favor of Harvard Dataverse. I would say they've been extremely accommodating and helpful in the process. So I want to just thank publicly the CAFE metadata staff and programmers working on migrating they've been working on this, and the migration is well underway. Most of the metadata have been transferred, but we're still waiting on getting all the data in place, and that's a more time-consuming process. Now, what happened, what kind of surprised us was NASA, as this originally, they didn't quite delete our data, but they just removed all the links to the data on our NASA servers, on our CDAC servers. And I think for good reason, they said, well, we're basically gonna mandate you to shut these down. So let's, remove those links. So what we learned is that they scraped our data from season managed servers and loaded them into the cloud. I don't know details on that. Some of those details are sparse for me. But one of the ramifications of this is that still, if you go to any of the DOIs for our data sets, they're all dead. They don't lead anywhere. That's because they originally pointed to CDAC. And what we had hoped to do was we had hoped to point all those CDAC DOIs to the Harvard Dataverse DOIs, but that's the next bullet point. But just as a parenthesis, you can in fact search for the data on the Earth Data Search tool, and you have to use this particular URL. And then after that, in the search box, you have to add another word or two to get to the data set that you might want. It's a little kludgy, frankly. It doesn't work very well because depending on the word, if it's like India or Kenya or some other country, well, gosh, all of our metadata have a full list of GCMD keywords, and those keywords include pretty much most countries in the world. So that doesn't narrow your search down very much. So that's an aside. HDV will be issuing their own DOIs. That's just part of the bargain, part of the deal. We had initially intended to point our DOIs to theirs, but that's not going to happen. Now it's understood that ESDIS will be managing our DOIs. So we're in the process of working with ESDIS to transfer our data site DOIs to them, and they'll be managing them henceforth. Let's just go through a few final considerations. This is a clear, lesson, which is that having copyright, and all of our data sets are, copyright trustees of Columbia University, was really important because otherwise, NASA could have equally well said, sorry, these are our data, we funded them. Who are you to put them up anywhere else? Thank you very much. So having that clear copyright was really important for our ability to basically self-determine what we wanted to have happen with our data. The value of the larger data network. This is a community effort. I just want, again, hats off to people like Steve, Ruth, the people at Harvard Dataverse, the countless people that we had conversations with at places like, at University of Michigan, and ICPSR, and elsewhere. People were really concerned and really wanted to help. Finally, and this is the big reveal, I was a former skeptic of generalist repositories. As chair of the World Data System Scientific Committee, if you know the World Data System, it's all about domain-specific repositories that have the domain expertise to manage and know their communities and know how to curate the proper data for those communities and all that. But what I had also noticed, one thing is, even though I was scientific committee chair, I was encouraging WDS to consider accepting generalist repositories for membership. And I think that policy, I don't know where they are with Cortrust Seal. I'm a little bit out of the loop with some of these things now. I'll be very, very transparent about that. But I do think that it's important to acknowledge the vital role that generalist repositories are doing. And frankly, even as I was manager of the CDAC, I was being pushed by the innovations of the generalist repositories to move faster and work more closely with data providers. Sometimes the specialist repositories can be a little bit cumbersome because we were considered a very prestigious data place to deposit data, and many data owners looked to us and wanted to have their data there. But it was time consuming to do dot every I and cross every T when it came to pushing our data out. So the generalists definitely, like, I would ask some of our own UWG members, these are the advisor group for CDAC, I'd say, why did you go and deposit your data with, you know, a Figshare or wherever they put it? And they'd say, well, because I had full control over my ability to publish my data when I wanted to publish it. And so we developed some workarounds so that we could get data out much more quickly as a result of those conversations. So with that, I would just say that it's too early to report complete success, but things generally augur well for the future. And I'll close with that and be happy to entertain any questions. I have to actually prepare for some lectures I have to give tomorrow. So even though it's almost 10 o'clock at night here, I can't stay on for the rest of the conversation as much as I'd like to. So I'll stop sharing and I'd be very happy to answer any questions now if I can help answer any.
Okay, in respect for Alex's time, does anyone have any questions, whether either in the room or online?
Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for that talk. I really appreciate your lessons learned and some of the thoughts that you gave in your final slide. I myself am sort of like you. I was kind of a skeptic about the generalist repositories because we have a specialized, but like after hearing your story about the resiliency that you had to sort of deal with your data sets, I'm kind of rethinking. I'm kind of rethinking that as well. So in the context of your presentation, like I'm starting to think of things like the data, like data sanctuaries. Like you've had to really mine and dig really deep, looking at so many generalist or specialist types of repositories. And I'm wondering if we could come together and identify like some key data repositories that could service our community. In particular, this is something I've been thinking about with regards to our NOAA colleagues. So ESRL, I don't know if there's any NOAA folks here, but ESRL, which is the Earth System Research Laboratory in Boulder, Colorado, is just 5 miles from NCAR, which is where I work. And if the funding cuts are proposed, then we're dealing with like gut-wrenching loss of a treasure trove of long-term monitoring observational measurements. And so I think they would really, they're probably looking at data sanctuaries. I don't know, but I'm just wondering like if NCAR can be a data sanctuary, if it temporary or in the meantime. But thank you so much for your presentation. You've really resonated with me and some of your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if there's much to say in response. I do think this question of, you know, community-led efforts to find sanctuaries. I'll just repeat that our data collection was, you know, tiny by comparison with many other collections. So that will immediately limit options. You know, the truth is, we've been looking for private sector and other sources of funding, and we've had some success in some limited areas. But we, you know, the CDAC was a $30 million 5-year contract, and that kind of money just doesn't come easily. And so being able to pay a generalist repository it says, you know, Harvard didn't say, hey, it's totally free of charge, we're going to make it, you know, and the sky's the limit. They have their own limits. And so we just have to realize that this is data curation, data management, and data preservation costs real money. This was a conversation we had at countless times in countless World Data System meetings, was sustainability. And of course, now we're facing the real fact that sustainability is an open question in places like the US, where we never thought it would be in the past. I see another hand up.
Hi, Alex. Really interesting talk. This is Steve Fromell, and I should take down my Ovis background because this is not an official Ovis question. But you mentioned that you thought the copyright gave you sort of power over the data. And I understand that sentiment, but I'm curious, traditionally federal employees are asked to apply open licenses to their data. Had it been an open license instead of copyrighted, do you feel like you still would have been at risk for not being able to, do what you wanted for the data?
Well, I'm not a licensing expert. I learned a lot in my over the years working with NASA and working with CDAC. Bob Chen, Bob Downs, these were the people who really, were foremost at our center in dealing with issues of the legalities of the data licensing. So all of our data were CC0 licenses, okay? But that doesn't mean you can't apply, my understanding is, doesn't mean you can't apply copyright to your data sets. And so we had every data set had a, copyright of Columbia, trustees of Columbia University. And in fact, I think Columbia, it was almost a requirement. And that's partly just an issue that Columbia's had a longstanding a deal and essentially approach they've had to federally funded research, which is that they don't sign away IP easily. They just don't give that over. So I don't know if that helps answers the question, but maybe there's someone in the room who knows more about these topics.
Hi, Alex. This is Ian Nesbitt at Data One. Thank you for your talk. I've really appreciated it. And I do absolutely still have a soft spot for specialist repositories, domain repositories, because that's a lot of what makes up Data One. But having worked closely with the Dataverse folks, I really also appreciate that they have a very strong mission to curate their data in a way that makes it searchable and usable and fair, for specific data, data uh, like data like yours. I do think that they are a little bit different than some of the larger generalist repositories like Zenodo, who don't really necessarily have that ability to curate. Dataverse has a huge team and a lot of dedicated people to be able to handle stuff like that, like the transfer of your data to them. So in some ways, you can't really generalize about generalist data repositories because some of them have the ability and the mission to sort of preserve those metadata values well, and some don't have really a desire or a need to. So just wanted to put that out there.
Well, listen, thank you for inviting me to join the session. I apologize I can't stay longer, but it's been illuminating for me, and I look forward to hearing whatever report out comes from the session. So take care and bye and good luck, as they say.
Yep. Thank you, Alex. Yeah. You can just put it straight to screen sharing. I'll pick
Okay,
up straight from
sure.
Okay, I am next talking about the NSF NCAR GDEX repository migration to Zenodo. I will keep this quick because I've already touched on quite a few of these points earlier, and I will continue to do so through the week. The reason we migrated from our homegrown on-prem specialist repository to Zenodo was reallocation of resources cost reasons. And we decided to migrate it to two different places, one being Zenodo, the other being the NSF NCAR Research Data Archive. Because the GDEX repository handles datasets that are larger than 50 gigabytes, and that is generally what Zenodo will accept. Things that are bigger than that limit had to go to somewhere else. There are currently 140 curated datasets on NSF NCAR as of this morning, I believe, or last night. There were 120 something datasets that were migrated from GDEX. We developed a script that uses the Zenodo API to automate the uploads of metadata and data to Zenodo. It's a lot nicer to use a WW2. Yes. Okay. There. So yeah, we were on the script. The script will automate uploading to the Zenodo API. I've linked through our GitHub repository that has the script written by Brian Bonlander. But the Zenodo API is not one-to-one with the features that are on the Zenodo GUI. So it does require looking through the GUI in order to add some features. Talking to at least some of their US developers, they are aware of it. There are just other higher priorities to keep up with rather than the development of the API further. And yeah, so we have these data sets that are on Zenodo, but there are lots of people that use the GitHub to Zenodo software integration. So the last time I did a search for just the word NCAR on Zenodo, there was something like 700 hits. And this was before I did the migration of 120, now 140-ish data sets there. So that number should be 840 now. And probably there are some variations. You could look at different model software, computational model software that's up there that doesn't have NCAR in the name, but are NCAR affiliated projects. How can we bring those into the Zenodo community, say we are curating, making this more fair, getting better statistics, not only for us as a specialist repository or people that are running this community on a generalist repository, but for the scientists themselves. These are all questions that we have yet to answer, that somebody else will answer. And at least for Zenodo, there is no way to pull a record into a community, which is not a DataSite thing, but a Zenodo software specific thing. So you have to send emails to people and basically beg them to do 2 clicks to add something to the NCAR community. And I'm happy. And the session after this, the archive your first or second data set, will go in step-by-step detail of how we migrated a data set manually from GDEX to Zenodo. So I'm happy to take any very detailed questions there. Otherwise, I'll take general questions afterwards in the general discussion. And now we will move on to Steve Diggs.
Just the next slide, right?
That's fine. Oh,
No,
No.
yeah,
the other slide deck, the second slide deck.
ah,
Yeah.
yeah, what is this thing here? Just so you know, the interim people are trapped because the door is chained shut, but the online people can run away now.
Okay.
Looks good. Yeah.
Wait, but I'm not sharing, or am I? I am sharing.
Looks good to me. Well, good morning. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. I'm Steve Diggs. I'm with the University of California Office of President, and I'm a research data specialist, but some people know me from Scripps. I'm trying to bury that. I need to talk about a couple of things first to lay the groundwork about what we're talking about. We talked a lot about generalist repositories, and two that came up. One is Zenodo. I'll talk about that in depth. The other is Harvard Dataverse. And you have to know that Dataverse is a research data management platform. It has its own developers and everything else. In the throw the ball and catch it sort of mode, there is Harvard Dataverse that is an instance of Dataverse, but there's also a UCLA medical Dataverse. You can download Dataverse and set one up probably before I finish talking. Just so you know that there's a difference between the RDM platform and the instance. And the instance usually will be the people that do as this gentleman said, talk about curation. They'll set what data sets they'll take in, how much disk space they have, and all of that. So know that there's a difference. Also tomorrow, there's in the unconference we've been hinting at, we're going to go take a deep dive into this, and we want as many of you to come as possible, because we really, in this moment that things are moving very fast with changing national priorities, we want to get everybody in the room to say, look, this is the situation with the data sets I see. These are the priorities about preserving access. And I'm not talking about copying data. If anybody who knows me in this moment, I'm like, don't copy data without talking to the data curators first. Don't do it. Because you'll break the persistent identifiers and you'll ruin scholarly output. Throwing data in the closet is like taking the binder off a book and throw all the pages out of the window. You haven't saved anything. You made it worse. Alex talked earlier about kind of a worst case scenario, a case where he had very little time, had a lot of data to move, and they were still profiling. Ruth and I were going, well, do you know your data set? How big is it? Will it fit in a bread box? And all kinds of things that they didn't know yet. And so credit to them for moving as fast as they did. And it all turned out quite well, but it is a worst case scenario. I'll be talking about a better case scenario. I think the future is in infusing domain expertise in safer places. One of those safer places may be something well-funded like Harvard Dataverse that has an endowment, or Zenodo that has EU backing and is, we think, will go into the future at least a couple of decades. There's a Discord group that many of us are in where we are assessing and working with EDGI and with PETP to make sure that when climate data rolls across people's desks, we all start talking. Learn how to tap into that network. If you have any questions, see me, see Joseph, Ruth, many others. And then let's talk about breaking some PIDs. All right. So if you don't know, Caroline is in the back. She is our CCHDO contact. CCHDO is a hydrographic data repository. It is a very domain-specific repository, but it connects to so many other data sets. It serves as this gold standard because it's all done by humans at sea, very carefully both collected and curated. There's actually better than 2,500 cruises. And as you can see there, I am not the technical director anymore, but this comes into play later in the story and becomes very important. The new technical contact is Andrew Barna, who has been there since he was an undergraduate student, along with Carolina, who was there as an undergraduate as well. I hired really good people. Anyway, scientific advisor and the co-PI is Sarah Perkey. And then in the back of the room was Karen Stotts, but I believe she went to another session. And she is the current director of CCHDO. You can see the geographic map of the actual coverage. It goes from 1972 to the present. It's international. It's under the GO-SHIP program in the US. That's largely funded by National Science Foundation, and 20% or so is NOAA. And other funding as people can find it. You can again see the geographic coverage in the middle, and then on the right-hand side, you can see some of the applications. One of them is deep ocean heat storage. For those of you who care, the climate signal that everybody cares about is millidegrees at about 4 kilometers down in the ocean, especially in the Southern Ocean. It's the only one that connects all the oceans around. You get the teleconnections. That's where climate change is happening. Air, who cares, right? Air heats up, cools down, it blows around, it gets rain. We also use CCHDO data is really critical for the autonomous vehicles. Not only the Argo floats that you see here, and there's 3 different versions. There's a standard one, biogeochemical float that collects pH and oxygen and other things that we didn't think we would be able to collect chemically and automatically at sea. And then there's a deep ones that go down to about 6 kilometers in the ocean, which is a feat of engineering. I was on a cruise last year that deployed them, and they are awesome. It certainly is the future of oceanography, but not yet. So we still need humans at sea helping to calibrate these things. So what is this GoShip Easy? GoShip, the archive that Carolina and Karen run, is the sort of as observed. So there's a fair amount of work, even though there's a lot of quality control. It comes in 3 standard formats. It contains both discrete measurements, so bottle closing and actually capturing water that's analyzed by human beings, and continuous measurements that come from various devices on the Rosette. You go over to GoShip Easy, that's another stage and a bigger refinement. So it's only dealing with the continuous measurements, so there's no chemical analysis necessarily, except for there may be oxygen in some of the CTD files, but it's only one instrument on that Rosette. It is probably the most popular and the most important one, but they are very different. And GoShip Easy is exactly what its name is. It's meant to be easier. It's meant for immediate research applications. So it's very well documented. It has more formats. They have 2 expert quality controllers, both of whom are PhD oceanographers, and they have a huge community around them that's setting standards. So if you want to get started with these data and you don't want to dig into the raw-ish data, you go to GoShip Easy. So we really started moving things in 2024. I moved on to Office of the President, but I was still talking to both Kat and to Andrew Barna, who did most of the heavy lifting. And it's like, why move these data? Well, they were housed within the CCHDO infrastructure. Andrew built all of that infrastructure himself, meaning it's custom, meaning it's hard to maintain. And if he stops answering the phone, the whole thing starts to fall apart. So we don't want that. We want to have this product that is heavily used stand on its own. There are going to be some trade-offs with that, and there's some bad assumptions that I'll talk about in a minute that you really want to pay attention to. So we have this single person dependency. It's a largely unfunded effort. Nobody was writing it as a line item in the new NSF grant. It's just something that we had decided to do years ago. It depended on this custom infrastructure that was hand-built, meaning that it was a complex update procedure, and you'll see some of the features in that page in a minute. That meant every time there was a single update to any file, Andrew had to go in, and he really couldn't tell anybody how to do it. There was a bag of bones, and you do some voodoo and dance around the circle, and it all starts to work again. And it's like, that's not scalable. That made it also difficult to transfer this knowledge, right? And we want to get to a place where it's easy to bring on a new person, and so you can have this, and this is what's big as a determinant for risky data. Is there a succession plan for the data curator? If there isn't, those data move into a very high category of risk, because when that person walks away, and I'll say we have a current crisis with WOD for a NOAA NCEI, Tim Boyer has left, and there is no clear successor, and the only person that was to succeed him will retire next month. So the situation is we have this infrastructure dependency, but we have some things in our favor. One, we can leverage our experience with UCSD Library, where we actually curated the entire data set and pushed it out to, what is it called? Help me out, Joseph. God, getting old sucks. Anyway, there's a repository on campus. It is an institutional repository, one of the categories we didn't talk about: domain, institution, generalist. And then exploit the insight. Man, that would be me, because moving to OP put me on the Zenodo Gray team, and I'm part of the development team for Zenodo, where I can ask things like, hey, if we were to put a data set out there that had more than 100 files, can we do it in the sandbox? Can you now take 500 files and put them? And they'd be like, okay, you're on the team. Yeah. So every time that Andrew would do something, I would put on my development hat, fly over to Switzerland, be in the meetings all day and go, I have a theoretical use case. And then it became a real thing. The migration methodology is built around not breaking things. If you know that you go to a paper and it says go ship easy and it has a DOI, you click on the DOI and it takes you to the data set. Everything's working behind the scenes. There are tons of squirrels with messages and they all know how to talk. And the moment you move data, and this is why it's Stronger Together says, do not move the data without talking to the curator. You move data from here to here and you break that entire chain. And I think Alex talked about, there's just dead DOIs. That's a bad situation. Zenodo has, so we wanted to work with the data producers. Katz is very technical. He does all his own programming. He's a perfect guy to work with, knows how to build a web page. Versioning strategy, Zenodo has its own versioning strategy. That means you add a file, it means a new DOI. That DOI goes to a thing called a concept DOI, and you have one that real persistent identifier that stays in place. You click on it, you always get to the latest copy of the data. That is a very, very, very attractive feature. We wanted to avoid a lift and shift. So we didn't want to try to squeeze, and Ruth and I went through this with Alex. We didn't want to take his entire infrastructure and push it into a new place. Rather, we used this as an opportunity to improve things that we might have been too lazy to update, right? So when you move house, what do they say? The things that'll clean your house is a move and a fire, right? So this was kind of a fire where we had to move. We had that format restructuring. So Zenodo can only take zip files. You can't have what we had on CCHDO, your ability to go, I just want the Indian Ocean stuff and I want to click on that and get that file in the format I want. It makes you take large bytes in terms of zip archives. So instead of having this nice feature, you could pick one thing at one time. We're like, you got to take it all. 1998 thinking says 500 megabytes is too much. 2025 thinking is always eat all of it all the time. Bandwidth is free, go for it. And so we wanted to eliminate that CCHDO infrastructure dependency. One bad assumption that we had, and never talking to the users, and this is why it's great to have 3 people just going, users get to deal with it, let's just do it, is this ability to break things out by basin. So you can see in the Southern Ocean, we could go to the Indian, the Pacific, or any one of the repeat lines and just grab those. So they were like, 5 megabyte little chunks you could get. It would have its own little program to download it and to ingest it. And we said, well, we'll just take that away. And we thought, okay, here comes the backlash from the old school oceanographers, not a peep. So it was a cool feature, but we could have wasted time trying to replicate this. And instead we're like, we're going to do it the Zenodo way. So here were the technical implications and the outcomes. I left behind a thing called Easy ID, an account. If you don't know it, if you're not in the University of California, you probably don't have access to it, but it keeps you from having to go to DataSite or Crossref to get your minting of your DOIs. If you're just an individual walking around, it actually is a service. And it says, oh, you're the manager of that DOI. It moved somewhere. Here's a form, and you just fill it out, and then it just does it. And we put in the concept DOI and link that back to the DOI. And all of a sudden, as the owner of that DOI, and this is very important, when we're moving data sets, we need to find the owners of these persistent identifiers and get them to cooperate with us to keep this system that we have that's super fragile. I want to say supercalifragilistic every time I say that. But it's very, very fragile, and we want to keep that intact. We did a 301. This is all Andrew. He did 301 redirect. If you don't know what that is, if you don't keep up on HTML codes, it is the most responsible thing you can do. It not only does a redirect, but it says this is a permanent redirect. So never again come to this other site that you thought you were going to. You're now going to go to Zenodo every time. That means the published papers from 2022 and before, those links all still work. Katz now, we call him Katz, but he's Professor Katsamata. He does all of his own updates. So he manufactures the file, he translates the IEEE binary, the netcdf, and everything else, and he pushes those up. And Zenodo just turns the gears and makes new version DOIs and points back to the concept DOI. We don't have to do that anymore. So let Zenodo do its thing. And then it has built-in versioning. So if you want to break it down and actually go to the DOI, that's the new version. And I know we're talking about PIDs a lot, but that's kind of where the gears turn. That built-in versioning really works. So we didn't have any user complaints on lost functionality. That came as a surprise, but we didn't care. And the concern, though, is long-term domain repository sustainability to do the redirect, because that DOI still points to the domain repository, which then redirects to Zenodo. That may be it. Oh, well, here's the result. The result is that the repository page has not changed at all. It still has the same hyperlink at the bottom of the page, that's where the arrow originates, and it now just points to Zenodo. So people that come to the domain repository and go, I don't need that GoShip Easy thing, they still click on the same link. They may be introduced to something else, but that something else actually gives it to them in zip archives. The entire data set is just under 5 gigabytes, but you don't have to swallow the whole thing every time. It comes in gigabyte to half gigabyte chunks for things you might want. I think that's it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Matt. We're straight into discussion time anyway.
Oh, perfect. Hi, Matthew Biddle, NOAA Integration Ocean Observing System Office. Steve, great presentation. Thanks for sharing your insights and experiences working through this. Have you heard anything from your users as far as, kind of similar to the question I posed in the chat before about downstream products and things? Like, I assume some users have built things based on whatever the organization was at the previous system. Have things changed now that you're pointing folks to Zenodo and maybe a loss of access capability or something like that? We can't hear you online.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep.
Now, can you hear me? Can you see me? Hey, Matt, what's up? So in answer to your question, most people who are making products, so GloDApp, a lot of the deep ocean, ocean heat content, WOD, those don't deal with GoShip Easy Ocean. They actually use the CCHDO datasets. So we didn't expect that there would be. Usually the people that use GoShip Easy Ocean are using those to combine them with other datasets and actual research on their way to publish. So there have been no complaints. We good?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'll do that to anybody who asks a question. I'm going to get right in front of you.
And now that, we've gone through all the case studies, we have 13 minutes until the end of the session. It is open season for questions either to Steve or myself for case studies, or if you'd just like to get on your soapbox and rant at us for 10 minutes, it's fine too.
I just have a quick question about Zenodo. There's obviously like a cost associated with submitting your data sets. Once it's been submitted, do you have to pay a maintenance cost?
No,
Oh,
No.
oh, okay. Oh, okay, just that 100 file limit?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then you said that you could do some additional curation on Zenodo that's outside of the generic Zenodo page that anyone can go to. Is that something that you negotiate with them? And is there a cost associated with like any kind of additional curation and additional information that you need to provide so that the user can find you and know what they're looking at?
This is a great question. And your name was? It's probably still Jackie. Yeah. That's a great question. And I not only was the president of the Hair Club for Men, but I was a member. I actually ran a repository for a domain repository. So there was I was a very staunch advocate of no, generalist repositories are trash and they don't do anything. Here's one of the ways that they address that is that they provide a platform for you to build a community. So you can actually, as a domain expert, go into Zenodo and say, I'm going to set up this community of deep hydrographic data. And I'm going to vet people that want to put their data sets in my community. And we will build an infrastructure around it, a community infrastructure that curates those data and puts them in and lets them be versioned and come back and forth. So a lot of the curation will be done outside of the repository, as it should be. Even the domain repositories I've worked for, we do the quality control and the curation outside and then deposit it back. We actually, when Caroline and I were putting data sets in, we had to go through Andrew's procedures to actually deposit the data that logged a bunch of things. So there's not this curation in place of the data set. Rather, the data sets are taken out, curated, and the expertise is given, and then the vetting is done and permissions given to put it back as the data set. So think of it as this new mechanism to build community within the generalist repositories to have a high degree of expertise, but have the stability long-term of these generalist repositories that are funded by, intergovernmental things like the EU. So the question is for the people online who couldn't hear, what about the versioning with the DOI? Do you have to do that as the data curator depositing? Zenodo does it automatically. You deposit a new version, mint a new DOI, it links to the concept DOI, and then that makes all of your scholarly works connect back to that concept DOI. So if you take that data set out, you make a new version, you deposit it, the old one's still there. It gets, if you think of it in the computer science, it gets pushed down on the stack. There's a new DOI minted, and then it's connected to the concept DOI. Yeah, and if you go to the GoShip Easy page on Zenodo, you can actually see that mechanism off to the right.
All I had went open.
Andrew Child, University of Idaho. Steve, I have a question for you. It looked like when you moved all your DOIs, in addition to your redirect, Zenodo generated a new DOI for all those data sets. Is there an advantage, disadvantage? Because I know when you go to Zenodo, you can tell Zenodo, I already have a DOI. So is there an advantage to duplicating all DOIs for your data sets rather than saying with the API, hey, all these data sets currently have a DOI, put the existing DOI and then just build the redirect to go to Zenodo's URL?
Andrew's a troublemaker. Anyway, the big thing is if you tell it you have a DOI already, now you get to do the versioning, right? So that's where the concept DOI is super handy, is you go, yeah, well, I have a DOI, it's this, but connected to your concept DOI when I deposit the data. And now when I push new versions, the versioning happens, but it really connects by itself. You break that if you come in and go, I have a DOI, I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk to DataSite and do all of this stuff. So that is the advantage or the disadvantage. You may need to do your own versioning.
Yeah, in a minute. No, because I just want to make sure I understand how this works. So you have your old DOI. Let's call it just scripts DOI.
Remember, just one DOI for the entire.
Oh.
It's not bulk.
Did you all get that online? There's only one DOI for the whole thing. So, okay. So rather than updating that DOI, you did this redirect. So in a sense, there's two legitimate DOIs now, or the old one still works from all the literature.
Which is the original DOI, the one that appears in papers. And if you link to that, because nobody.
But if I do a new paper, I'm going to use the new Zenodo DOI, right? Sure. Okay. Yeah. But it's the same thing, you know, there's scripts, DOIs, Zenodo Duva.
Yeah, get to the data that's used in publication.
Right.
Is the
Right. But it makes things complicated for tracking and provenance and so
Yeah.
forth. But I understand what you're talking about, why you did it that way. Okay, so I'll change the topic. And to Joseph. So you mentioned this, I forget how you put it, roving Wikipedia editors or something.
Yes.
And as Steve mentioned, the thing that we didn't talk about here in this session is institutional repositories.
Mhm.
And there's some really good institutional repositories like Harvard Dataverse. And there is an organization called the Digital Curation Network, which I'm not up to speed on their current status, but I really like their model. It's a coalition of institutional repositories and their curators. And, you know, one university has a specialist in genomics, another university has a specialist in oceanography. And so when the university, the genomics university gets an oceanography data set, they call the oceanography curator at the other university. And so they share the curation across
Mhm.
this network of institutional repositories. And I just really like that model. I don't know if its current status, how well it's been doing. And it's a very different community from us. It tends to be university librarians. But I'm just wondering, has that figured into your thinking in all of this? And is that something we might want to participate in? Or set up our own network of curators, what have you?
I have not heard of them before now, but I mean, I've thought of that at least in the software infrastructure side, cyber infrastructure side, where if we are continued to facing flat to negative budgets for all of our repositories that have existed with 3 or 4 programmers before, and they get cut down to 1 programmer. If you throw all of those single programmers working on the Zenodo Invenio platform or the Dataverse platform, you now have 20 programmers all working on the same platform versus 3 to 4 working on their homegrown solution at 5 different places. You now have much more resources, and you're focusing all of your domain's data management programmers to use one platform. I mean, if we want to go back, we can talk about operating systems and Linux versions and BSD versus Linux and whatnot. I don't see any reason why the same wouldn't hold true for data curation right now. You know, if we lose funding from 3 to 4 data curators to 1 data curator, if now that load is then split across 20 different domain curators across the US, I don't have any conceptual reason why that wouldn't work. Yeah. They do a lot. Yes. Yes.
Just wanted to put a plug in for libraries. They may be our salvation.
There's other questions from my. Yeah.
Okay. I cannot. I can try to pull them up.
Whoever has a question, you can unmute yourself.
There are a lot of questions.
Folks online, you can unmute yourselves and ask the questions, or I can read them out. Let me see. Matt Biddles, does Zenodo Dryad meet NARA requirements for federally funded data?
I don't know.
We
Yeah,
don't
so later on down in the chat, I think this is more of a question for NCEI, but I did a little bit of digging and found this draft list of approved data repositories, and Zenodo, Figshare, Dryad, all of these are part of that. But I think it's in context of that's not the preferred option for, at least for NOAA. Before I put my foot in my mouth, I see Ken's got his hand raised. I'm gonna let him save me from the torture I've given myself.
Can you guys hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay. Yeah, and like John Ralph just put in the chat, the short answer to the question is no. But it's definitely way more complicated than that. You know, you just pointed out, Matt, how in our NOAA data governance we have this option now. Again, not the preferred route, but certain conditions where people can use these generalist data repositories. But it's sort of an if NCI isn't able or willing to accept it kind of model, or if it's really just better to go to this other to these other places. But yeah, NARA requirements are interesting. There are a lot of them. There are many, many, many. A lot of them have to do with governance and controls. A lot of them have to do with like managing retention schedules, transferring of federal, you know, because everything's in the context of what is a federal record. And the things we're talking about here, these, you know, federally collected or paid for environmental data sets are federal records. And so there's just no way for there's just no direct or easy way, maybe is the best way to put it, for another entity to do all of that and to meet all of that without some kind of more established relationship with SLAs and stuff like that, because then the government just can't confirm that it's meeting its federal records management's requirements. It may well be that Zenodo or whoever is doing many of the same functions, but if there are no controls in place to guarantee that, then we're not doing our jobs. Basically, so it's a complicated answer, but the short answer is really no.
Okay, well, it is the end of the session. Thank you all for coming. If you'd still like to ask questions, we'll be here for another 30 minutes or so, I think, until the next session. An hour? Wow. Okay. And yes, I will be leading I hope 20-minute migration of one data set from into Zenodo. You can come and critique the process there, ask more questions after that. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.